We are here today. First of all, this is the Film Frequency long break we've had. I wanted to go ahead and stream live. I don't expect a lot of people to be here only because it's been a long and extremely long break. So I don't necessarily expect for a lot of people to pop up in here, but we'll see. It kind of is what it is on that front. As I'm getting my software back together because it has been such a long time. But that being said, we are here today to review the the reboot of Scream. Yeah, this is so going into this film. First of all, let me just set the stage here. I'm a huge Scream fan. Like, again, the original would have come out. I was still a kid, and that I guess I feel very close to it because it's one of the only franchises, horror franchises, that has such a long legacy that I've been there since the beginning. Right, so I'm a huge Halloween fan. But again, by the time I came around, the Halloween sequels were horrible. Now I've of course come to love Halloween. Halloween's my favorite horror franchise of all time. But with Scream, it holds a special place mainly because, like I said, I've gotten to be there since the beginning when it came from Scream, and I've really gotten to watch this franchise grow and evolve, and me grow and evolve with it. And this, so I guess let me start off by saying this: my as far as when this film was announced, I was extremely nervous about this film. Just because, like I said, a whole Scream is such uh, a near and dear place to me as far as horror franchises. And so when they announced that they would be doing um a new sequel to it, where I sat with it was, all right, Scream 4. I didn't have the biggest appreciation of Scream 4. I didn't really love Scream 4. I didn't hate it either. But I've come to enjoy the movie more as time goes on. I really think that Scream 4, for example, has really aged very well, and it's one of those movies that really get better with time. There are certain things that I don't like in it, but it definitely has its place, and it's definitely a fun movie. But when they announced this sequel to it, I of course was nervous, like that. Like I said, because I didn't like as much the fact that Wes Craven is gone, all that. All that really just added into like just a level of like, okay, I don't know what to expect from this film. And so we're going to try to start this off without spoilers. So first, let me just say, like I said, I'm going to try to do a spoiler-free section of this before we get into full spoilers. This movie, from tone-wise, just from the opening, it sets a tone and it's like a welcoming thing back into this world. That opening phone conversation, I don't really feel that's a spoiler because we know all Scream movies really start with that, was very like engaging, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a little bit different, but it still felt a lot of the same. I think the fact of how the meta-ness part of this film has evolved over time, and how like for the people who are calling this movie quote unquote woke Scream, gotta shut the fuck up. Like, that word is starting to be thrown around so much, it's already lost meaning. And when people use it, it's really like, I just look at people like who use that to describe something that, because it has a message, as just being idiots. Because Scream has always had a social commentary. It's always been in commentary on not only the horror genre itself and how it's evolved over time, but how we as people in ways as well. But this movie starts off in a great way. And some of the things in this, like, I love how the legacy characters are used. We get way more Dewey than we get any one of the other legacy characters in it. But I think how they are used, it makes sense not only to what we know about the characters, but to how we've seen them evolve over the course of this franchise. And because of all those things, it really does lends itself to a passing of the torch in a lot of ways. And we'll talk about why. But a lot of the characters in this that did stand out, I think they left themselves openings where we can grow to love these characters. Maybe probably not as much as the originals. It's very hard when you have a new set of characters that you love as much as legacy and original characters, but you can love them in their own right. They are solid characters in their own right. And because of that, it's like they did a really good job with that. The characters really stood out to me. The kills in themselves, you see a lot of things in like marketing saying that it's so brutal. It's one of the, I didn't really get that feeling at all for me. Like it was, the opening was a lot more, that the opening attack was probably a lot more brutal than I was expecting it, because those opening attacks in Scream movies are usually really pretty straightforward. The only one that I could think like was like overly brutal in a way, because of the cat and mouse game. Like, yeah, the Drew Barrymore, especially you saw the unrated version where you actually got to see her guts fall out, but otherwise it was pretty straightforward cat and mouse game. The Cotton Weary one was probably the most brutal, I would think, just because of the way things went. But outside of that, this one was just way more of a damn, she got fucked up. And so that opening in this really set that tone and what this movie was going to be. And then as we get introduced to these cast of characters, you know, a lot of people will say, hey, you know, I kind of figured it out. And I don't necessarily think the reveal of the killer was supposed to be as much a surprise as it was in the earlier films. I really do think in this film, it was the motive behind why the killers were there. And we'll get into that in the spoiler section, that was supposed to be the focus there, more so than the reveal of the killers themselves. And I think because of that, that's why, like, you'll hear a lot of people say that they figured it out. I don't necessarily think they were trying to hide it all the way to make it as much of a whodunit as much as the original Scream films. But as far as like a continuation into this universe, they picked up a lot of things, and the tone is very much, I feel like they earned a lot of what this film did that Scream 4 didn't necessarily earn right away. Like I said, Scream 4 for me, I learned to appreciate more over time. But because of all that, like, this film did things that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I really do, in many ways, I will say, I think this is the best Scream sequel. And for the story, and I'm trying to hold off and to get into the spoiler section with that, but I think for anyone who's hesitant to watch this or thinks that maybe the hype is too much, you need to absolutely go and see this film, especially if you're a fan of the franchise itself. And if you're a horror fan, then you absolutely should have been there already. What are you waiting for? But let's go ahead and get into the spoilers of this film, because I really want to jump into it. First of all, that opening scene and the fact that she doesn't die, right, is that's right there is a first in the Scream franchise. And I think that was huge in many ways, the fact that she didn't die, and it played into the fact that these killers were trying to do something different as well. And then we get that phone call, and, you know, you're expecting in the phone call to be like, oh, she died, because it kind of cuts away as what we thought he's going in for the killing blow, the Ghostface character. And that didn't happen. I think right there, you know, when we get introduced to our new main character and what she means to this franchise, and this is what I want to start off with, right? So Sam's character, we find out, is the daughter of Billy Loomis. And I like it and don't like it in equal ways, right? But I think I like it more than I don't. So Sam being revealed as the daughter of Billy Loomis, it opens itself up, especially in sequels, right? Because now that they've set in this world that the fans of the Stab franchise are so huge in the story, that now you if they find out that Billy Loomis's daughter is alive, can that send cycles her way? Like, people who almost want to worship her because of her father in a way, or want to take her out because then they can say they're the ones who killed Billy Loomis's dad. Now, what I think may happen, or I would like to see happen, we've heard for years and years and years that Stu may still be alive in an insane asylum. Now, what if he finds out, and keep in mind, Billy Loomis kind of turned on him, that he had a daughter, and he goes after the daughter. If he gets out and goes after the daughter or anyone else, I think they said that, and that part of it I like a lot. I think that it was almost unnecessary to need to tie her into being the daughter. Now, I know in the end of this movie, and the way that she kills the final killer, it really, like, she snaps and she has that psychotic. But the thing is, like, all right, so you didn't have any type of psychotic issues before you found out that Billy Loomis was your father, and then that, just finding that out, that revelation, now you have to take these antipsychotics and stuff like that. It raises questions again, as sometimes with film, I think too deep on, but, you know, those type of things made it weird that they made her Billy Loomis's daughter again, and it's supposed to be 25 years from the original. She was gone, so she's only supposed to be 23. That doesn't happen again. I pay attention to those small things that probably a lot of people aren't paying attention to, but it said that she left when she was 18, and then she was gone for 5 years, will make her 23. But they keep saying in this film it's been 25 years since the original murder. I don't know if that was just something that they missed, but it's definitely something that stood out to me again because I was paying attention, trying to pay attention for how they were going to really link in the fact of making her Billy Loomis's daughter. But like I said, I love it for the idea of sequels, right? And I think that if they build around the fact that now she is not only because she survived Ghostface attacks, but also because she's the daughter of Billy Loomis, and this is what generates these cycles to come after her repeatedly, that you can set yourself up for a really good franchise going forward. A really good franchise. And so, it's going to be, like I said, interesting to see just how they use that, if they do use it. And we saw like her seeing the vision of Billy Loomis and things like that, if that plays a part, if they continue this franchise. And we'll see, according to box office, if they're going to get a sequel. If they are going to get a sequel, I expect it to be announced not too much longer into the future. We'll probably get it soon after the first or second week's box office numbers. But okay, that part, Sam, like I said, as the actress, like I love her. She did great in her role. And another thing, and again, this review is really informal, so I'm just going over everything. Is what bothers me is how many times Ghostface was on the phone talking to people in the same room and they didn't hear that Ghostface was in the same room. Like it happens in the opening, it happens in the hospital with Sam. Again, I guess it happens with the sheriff, is Judy as well, but she was running up to it, so she wouldn't have necessarily been paying attention that way. But it's like you guys didn't. He was literally less than 5 feet away from you. How can you not hear somebody talking on the phone? That's fine. And there's always a delay, right? It's not a 1-for-1 when somebody's talking on the phone to you. How they didn't see that, but again, that's just things that I noticed that may not be as big of a thing in this, but it is what it is there. Overall, though, this film just as a cast of new characters, Tara as well, the fact that she lives at the end as well, and she's been through so much. Now she can be another victim or focus of Ghostface killers going forward. Wes and his mom, their scenes were just like, the thing that made the West scene so sad is the fact that his mom is gone getting food, and you see him go through this whole process of setting up their bowls and everything and being thoughtful and preparing their drinks because his mom's coming here. And little does he know, his mom's going through shit outside, right? And it's been murdered in a way. And so like that was one of the more impactful deaths in this film as well. Just looking at things, the twins that we end up finding out are related to Randy. I really do like these twin characters, and I didn't think in the first scene that they're introduced in, when we get that kind of scene that's a playback on the original screen where it's the group of friends sitting around talking, when we get that, the twin character, I didn't realize they were twins at first. I thought I was going to hate these characters, and you end up really, Chad and Mindy to me were characters that I was glad to see end up living in this film, and that they were going to come back, and they had more layers to them than what I was thinking that they were going to have coming in. Chad is really set up to kind of be the dumb jock, right? You think that that's what he's going to be, but very early on, they show that it's more to him in that. And then in the last scene, him like admitting to his girlfriend, hey, I don't feel comfortable having sex with you because you may be the killer. It was a good scene. It was a good scene. And Mindy, I've never seen Jasmine Savoy Brown is her name. I've never seen her anything else, but she has some great comedic delivery in this that I think plays very well in the horror genre, and I'm excited to see her going forward. So yeah, Liv, which is the girlfriend of Chad, it was kind of hit or miss. When she ends up dying, it was kind of so quick. And that's another thing that this movie does differently that really made me think that it was not necessarily about the mystery of who the killers were, because when we get into that final scene and you think you're going to get that playback off on, okay, which one's the killer, she immediately pulls out the gun and shoots her in the head. It's just like, fuck it. Like, and you immediately know she is one of the killers. Now she does have an accomplice, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, as far as the new characters, I think I talked about most of them here. I really did like this new cast of characters. Again, not as much as the original. Sam is definitely the standout, which she should be because she's the new, and you can't even say final girl. And maybe that's another commentary on the horror franchise, is that it's not about like just the final girl anymore. We get a lot of characters that survived the end of this movie. But with that being said, like I really like the new characters. Let's get into the legacy characters some. And we're going to start with the one who really gets the most screen time in Dewey. And Dewey didn't really get that much screen time either. But the way that they use him in his screen time, he gets the most out of the returning 3 legacy characters. You really get in the head of Dewey and see what, since Scream forward to this, everything that went on, we end up finding out that he actually left Gail because they moved to New York for Gail to take a big time reporting job, and he couldn't cut it. He left in the middle of the night to go back to Woodsboro, didn't even tell her, and that's why they weren't together. And that is a big flip on the times that we've seen them split before. So that was crazy to see, to see Dewey there, but you really see him living with the pain of that. And he even says it, the fact that he left in the middle of the night like a coward, that he couldn't cut it in New York. And you really understand the weight of how he's living. He was forced to retire from being the sheriff and everything like that. You feel the weight of that. You feel the weight of Dewey's character. And again, in the hospital scene, hey, this is another thing that they didn't use enough in this movie that I thought they were going to use more, is the fact that we get one scene that Ghostface has this device where they can click it on, and while they're walking around, they now have the Ghostface voice. It was speculated that this may be the case before the movie came out, and at that point, it was speculated that they were going to do it, that they were going to do it that way, because then you have Ghostface actually able to talk to people live. That's not something that we usually get. Usually in Scream movies, it's you get the conversation or the shit talking, so to say, on the phone, and then when the character's live and in action, they're silent, right? So to be able to have more of an interaction while he's attacking these people, and we really only get to see one scene of that new device that initiates the Ghostface voice. They can talk live. We only even got to see that in the hospital scene, and it's used to effect there, especially with the Dewey thing. What's going on, DZ? Again, we're doing spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled about the new Scream movie, my brother, don't stay in here. But so to see that they wanted to add that layer of to Ghostface, that he's able to actually verbalize himself live when he's actually attacking people, and we really only get one scene of that, was a little bit weird to me there. I think that could be something that maybe they use in the franchise going forward if they do make sequels. But the scene with Dewey, the whole hospital scene from the get-go, the fact that it came off the back of Sheriff Judy Hicks and Wes being murdered by Ghostface, and then you get the characters coming to see this murder, and then Sam realizing, hey, she sees the cop who's supposed to be protecting her sister, like, hey, if you're here, who's watching my sister? Then you get the mad dash to the hospital back, and you get Ghostface really sitting there toying with Tara, following her as she's going in the hospital in this wheelchair and bleeding out of her hand, and she has a broken leg and things like that, and on the phone with Sam, and then you find out Sam was stalling, and they come out and Dewey shoots Ghostface. And that fight with Ghostface, they do it so well pacing wise, because what they do in that is that they set it up to say, oh, you think Dewey's going to die. And then Dewey fights back and says, not today, shoots Ghostface about 3 or 4 times, gets to the elevator, could go away to safety. And then Dewey says, oh, I didn't shoot him in the head, playing back to what we heard in previous Scream movies. And you're like, no, Dewey, what are you doing? You literally just got in a fight with Ghostface, a hand-to-hand fight, and didn't get stabbed and got away. And now you're going back. And as soon as he goes back and the elevator closes and they play that music and she's loading his gun, which looks like a badass shot, you're like, it's too early in the movie. Fuck, Dewey's about to go. And then the way that scene plays out, the fact that you get the first stab and you're like, well, Dewey's been stabbed before, right? So maybe Dewey will survive. Maybe Ghostface is going to stab him, go after the other characters. We'll find out at the end of the movie, Dewey did survive. And then pulls the knife up and you just see so much blood rush out of Dewey. And then Ghostface takes another knife, stabs Dewey in the back, and then pulls that knife up. And then you hear Ghostface say, to play off Dewey's line earlier of, today, yes, today. And then it was a pleasure, or it's an honor, that the fact that Ghostface got to kill Dewey, the one who's literally lived through 9 times he's been stabbed, as he said earlier in the movie, and you get Dewey just laying there in his own blood, and Ghostface doing this pose with the 2 knives out. It was a badass scene. It was a badass image, and it lets you know, hey, nobody's safe. For so long, everybody's been saying these 3 legacy characters in Scream, the fact that they have not died, they haven't lost them, and you get that in this movie, and that really lets you know that this franchise is moving on to new places. So with that being said, again, great. Dewey's death was earned because of how he was in this movie. But other 2 legacy characters, Courtney Cox and Neve Campbell, Gail and Sydney, the fact that they get as minimal screen time as what they do, it's good, right? And I can understand if people were disappointed by this, but for me, the reason why I say that it was a good thing is because this film for the most part stood on its own legs without using Sidney Prescott for the most part. Yes, in marketing they did, which they were going to, they needed to do, and everything like that. But really, this story could have been pretty much the same without Sidney Prescott being in it, and that is a huge thing for this Scream franchise if they plan on moving forward. We'll see how they plan on using them. I have said and speculated and thought before that what if each one of these movies we lose another legacy character? Now I know that's kind of what they did with Star Wars and people really didn't like it. I wouldn't be mad if they decided to retire the characters of Gale and Sydney and kind of just focus on this new set of characters as they move forward. That could very well be a thing. But I like the way that they were used. The fact that Sydney was not going to come to Woodsboro. It took for Dewey to be killed for her to come, and Gale only came because of Dewey's text, and then he didn't respond to her text. So like the way that they naturally came back, and the fact that it wasn't, hey, we need to come, or they were called in, they came naturally because of the way that the plot worked out was great there. And then how they used them in the end, the fact that you just get two people that are literally like, I'm over this shit. Like the fact that when the girl runs out and like they're like, hey, what do you think? And Gale's like, yeah, she's definitely faking it. Like it was just a great scene to see from two characters that at this point have been through this shit 5 times with countless different ghost faces. Like it just made sense that at this point they're just they expect everyone to be Ghostface, and they're over the shit. They're not trying to play the guessing game. They're not trying to, even when Sydney finally gets on the phone with Ghostface and she's just like, hey, you know what? I'm over this shit. I'm not having fun with this. And hangs up, and you hear Ghostface, no, and then she shoots through the door. It's fucking crazy, man. It's awesome. Like what they did and how they fought expectations in this were great. Let's go ahead and get to the last two things in this, right? The killers. Richie and Amber, the killers in this. Richie, who was the boyfriend, and Dewey early on, less than 30 minutes into the movie, knew it was the boyfriend. Nobody listened to him. They kind of moved on. But the way that this happened, the fact that it was the boyfriend and Amber, like I said, especially in that first scene with Amber, when you see her and she kind of mentions the sister, she's like, oh, the one that left her. You kind of get that feeling. She was always making weird faces in it. So I definitely thought it was her. Now, I did not expect Richie. At one point I did. And then the movie went so long without him really doing anything. And I was like, oh, it's not Richie. But it ended up being Richie being the second killer. Like I said, I don't think this one was much going to be a whodunit as far as who was the killer. It was more so about their motive and the fact that it's the toxic fandom. They use toxic fandom, something that we see every single day nowadays with the rise of social media and everybody being connected. This toxic fandom, these fans that feel like they have an ownership over the property that they're fans over, and they wanted to correct it because they weren't happy with the Stab sequels, is extremely meta. Extremely meta. I think sometimes people are focusing too much on who the killer was, or the fact that they figured it out, and not really realizing that that's not what this movie was about. Yes, that's what Scream movies in the past have been about, that, but this one was more about the motive than it was who the killers were. Again, like, yeah, their motives were a little bit weak, but I feel like motives always in the Scream franchise are a little bit weak. When you look at like Billy and Stu probably had the best ones. They got completely corrupted, and Billy he took the fact that his mother left out on and zeroed that in on Sydney's mother and everything like that. But then if you look at the sequels, like, in fact, Mrs. Loomis, the fact that you're mad at Sydney, the fact that your son became a serial killer because you left, right? Regardless of you finding out they're cheating or he was cheating with Miss Prescott or anything like that, you left him, but you blame that on Sydney, right? And then in Scream 3, the brother, right? Again, I guess I understand where they were going for with that, but again, his motive wasn't the best either. Everything that he went through, if you just wanted to kill Sydney and let her know about your mom, you could have snuck up on her and just stabbed her because she didn't know who the fuck you were from Adam. But with that being said, and then in Scream 4, the whole cousin thing, wanting to be the star, again, I understood it and it all made sense into where it was there. But the Scream killers have never had the best motives, right? It's nothing like you're just like, oh, when the revelation of why they did it, you're like, this is amazing writing. But in this one, it makes sense when you talk about toxic fandom, and especially in me and having like a sports podcast and everything, we run into toxic fandom and fans that feel like they know better than the owners of the IP that they're a fan of every single day. And the fact that they met on Reddit and everything like that, it was true to life in this film. And overall, what I'll say in this Scream movie, and I may do another review where I sit down and do a more formal one, talk about themes and all. This is kind of just get to my initial thoughts and feelings out on the film. Overall, this Scream film to me is probably the best sequel of all the Scream films. It's not definitely not as good as the first one, and I like how they set this one up for the future of the franchise, built around these new characters in Sam, Chad, Mindy, and Tara. That really, while it's weird to have that many people survive a Scream movie, right? That's 4 people survive a Scream movie. But I feel like they've earned it to where now if they do a sequel, we still don't like those characters as much as the legacy characters, but they've earned it, right? They've earned to continue telling the story of these characters. They may not even use them all. The fact that we also found out Kirby's still alive from Scream 4, how she may be used, right? Maybe she takes out on the fact that she was a Ghostface killer and the original Ghostface's daughter is alive. Maybe she becomes a killer. Hayden Panettiere is not like working a lot right now, so maybe you can have her come back to the Scream franchise in that way. I've already talked about how they could possibly bring Stu back in the future of this franchise. It's a lot of different things that they can do in this franchise going forward, and I am one for this being the initial film and hopefully the reboot of the franchise as a whole. I think they did a really, really good job. I give this film a solid 3.5 out of 5, almost a 4. It's almost a 4, right? It probably 3.75 is more, but it's almost a 4 out of 5 for me, just considering all those factors. Let me know what you guys think about it down below. But that's it. This has been my review of Scream 2022. Technically Scream 5. Make sure you're following the podcast at the Film Bros Pod, all that good stuff, man. I will be more consistent on this while JB's still down. Shout out to JB, who's my co-host on this podcast. He's still going through his stuff, but he'll be back at some point in time. He's moving, getting his equipment settled and everything like that. But we will be back on the Film Frequency. Thank you for joining us. I know this live was impromptu. I'm going to try to do more live streaming. I've learned more about live streaming with the Chicago Bulls podcast to do, so I'm going to try to take what I've learned from there over to this one. But that's it for me. I'm out this motherfucker. Peace, y'all.